So we are reading for the 8th Sunday in Ordinary Time. You see the Gospel according to Luke, chapter 6, verses 39 to 45. Jesus told this parable to his disciples. Can one blind man guide another? Surely both would fall into the pit. The disciple is not superior to his teacher. The fully trained disciple will always be like his teacher. Why do you observe the splinter in your brother's eye and never notice the plank in your own? How can you say to your brother, "Brother, let me take out the splinter that is in your eye," when you cannot see the plank in your own? Hypocrites, take the plank out of your own eye first, and then you will see clearly enough to take out the splinter that is in your brother's eye. There is no sound tree that produces rotten fruit, nor again a rotten tree that produces sound fruit. For every tree can be told by its own fruit. People do not pick figs from thorns, nor gather grapes from brambles. A good man draws what is good from the store of goodness in his heart. A bad man draws what is bad from the store of badness. For a man's word flow out of what fills his heart. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. If you remember from last week, we indicated that we are now reading in this chapter 6 parts of what is called the Sermon on the Plain, distinguishing it from Matthew's version, which has similar injunctions. The Sermon on the Plain indicating that, at least this is one reference point that some of the early fathers in preaching about it made, indicating that while the Gospel of Matthew is about your aspirations, blessed are those who, blessed. With Luke, it's more that the plain, the ordinary circumstances of life, the same way where we have ordinary time in the church's liturgy and so on. I like to think of it that way, that as we are living our ordinary lives, these are some of the things that we need to think about and to try to imbibe in our own lives. And it begins, at least it indicates this, that it's all parables, which means we have to enter into the story. And here it's not so much a story as just a basic statement about life. Can a blind man see? Can one blind man guide another, right? Both will fall into a pit. Now, you're not supposed to take it literally, because one blind man sometimes will guide another because the one who is guiding sees a little bit more clearly than the one who's being guided. So don't take these things literally. Remember, what he's really talking about is that if you are going to play a certain role, make sure that you are in a position to play that role well, So when you're talking about seeing and guiding, I keep on being quite amused at how many people are very quick to say, you do this, you do that. This is the way to do it. This is the way to do it. And that is one of the challenges that the church faces today, especially with the laity, because there was a time when, and certainly in my childhood or my young adulthood, when only a priest or a nun was seen to have anything to offer you really about the way of Christ and the way of holiness. Now we are seeing that there are a lot of people who have an experience of God and so on. But with that has come a kind of righteousness on the part of some people. I run the prayer group. I am the one who's responsible for the readers. And if you say you are responsible, are you a seeing person or are you a blind person? Right? People who are responsible for readers, people who are responsible for liturgy, people who are responsible for social action, social service in the church. If you take the whole question of you are supposed to be helping with the ministry to the poor. That's easy to think that I know. Oh, yes, I'm responsible here. You heard said so often, I'm responsible for Caritas. Do you really know what being responsible for Caritas means when both the Pope and the officials who are themselves responsible for Caritas on a universal scale have laid out a different understanding of what that is about for the church today? You know, the bishops were talking about that 2 years ago. How do we help people in those situations to understand that the way one of my brother bishops put it is that if you are serving the poor, two things. One, you must be able to look the poor in the eye. You must be able to look the poor in the eye. And then echoing the words of Pope Francis, you must smell like the poor. How many of lay people and religious and priests who like to think that they are doing this kind of work can say, I know how to look the poor in the eye? A young nun who was dying, when she was asked to comment on something she had written, she talked about being able to serve the poor, knowing their names. I must admit that people come into my office and I have to struggle to remember the name because I don't see them that often. You know, I see them once a fortnight, sometimes once a week. But it takes you a while to get to know their names. So the whole question of leading and guiding people, you know, means that you have to have a sense of what you're really called to do. And then the other point that is made in the very first paragraph, the tendency to blame. There's a splinter in your eye and there's in somebody else's eye, and you want to try and take it out. Are you sure that's what you are able to do? Are you seeing right? Of course, as a parable, it's meant for us to enter into the spirit of the parable, you know, and to be aware, you know. Actually, as I say that, one of the funny things about this particular passage is the people who say plank, you cannot see the plank in your own, right? But in fact, are hearing plaque. You know what plaque is in the eye? I'm not too sure what they call it in Grenada. In Trinidad, they call it yampi. But it means that there's something else. Huh? Well, yeah. You know, sometimes it's a whitish kind of thing in the eye. And you have that in your own eye, and you're trying to criticize somebody else because, you know, and that is what blinds you sometimes to seeing. So it's a very interesting thing to think about, that you're criticizing somebody and you're trying to change them, but you're not realizing how you can be criticized and how you need to change yourself. And the gospel is full of this. And this particular Sermon on the Mount, like the Sermon on the Plain, like the Sermon on the Mount, challenges us in the same way. And then the other thing about it is there is no sound tree that produces rotten fruit, nor again a rotten tree that produces sound fruit. Now, again, you don't take it literally, because there are a lot of sound trees that you by the time you look into the fruit, it's rotten because the birds have beaten you to it and they've eaten just a bit of the stem of the fruit and that kind of thing. So let's not be literal. The point is that when you go to a tree, any kind of tree, you're looking for sound fruit. And if you can't get any sound fruit on it, it's probably because the tree itself, at the root, is beginning to rot. Now, that calls all of us to look again at ourselves. And the whole of this section is a challenge in that regard. Be careful. Be very careful. I find that to be a challenge for me as a bishop, because people like to tell you, oh, bishop, you're not saying anything about this. Like, as chairman of the Conference of Churches, I hear that all the time. Conference is not talking about this. The conference is not talking about that. And really, is it meant that the conference should be talking about everything? I know for myself, I'm at a stage in my life where, people been talking about these things for ages and nothing happens. Unless I am sure that I can say something that will make a difference, I will hold my tongue, So it's an insight for all of us to recognize this, that what kind of fruit, it's the fruit, it's by their fruits that you will know them, and therefore to look at the fruit. In Corinthians, we read about, in Galatians rather, we read about the fruits of the Spirit. Can you identify those in your life? Love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. Those are fruits. Are you a good tree, a sound tree, or a rotten tree? Are you able to produce the fruits of the Spirit? Are you loving? Are you joyful? If all you know is how to be self-centered with other people, you don't know what the fruits of the Spirit are all about. So it's a question here of being able to, the very last sentence, for a man's words flow out of what fills his heart. And I want to invite you to a moment of prayer and self-reflection. Some years ago when I moved into a new parish, the very first Lent, I gave out leaflets that had the whole of Luke 6 printed on it. But the top of the leaflet, the title of the leaflet read, "What fills your heart?" What fills your heart? And I think that is a question for this whole passage. What fills your heart? To be able to answer that sincerely, and where necessary to be able to ask myself, how do I have a heart that is filled with all that is precious and all that can be learnt from the whole of chapter 6 of Luke? What fills your heart?